Well, hello there. Welcome to the video. I'm Alyssa. I write books. It's been so long since we've chatted like this. I say that as if we aren't literally chatting every single day about literally everything, but I haven't done a sit-down little podcasty episode in a long time. So that is what we are doing for today's video. I put a community tab post over on my community tab, hence community tab post, a couple weeks ago when I hit 4,000 subscribers, and today I am answering all of your hot burning questions. I wrote them down, so I don't have it on the top of my head who asked them, but thank you to everyone who did. If I didn't answer your question, it's likely because it's already included in a different video, either coming up or already posted. So I'll just leave you in mystery. The first question I am going to answer is, how do you write so fast? So I don't really think I write like really fast, to be honest. In a given sprint, if it's a 25-minute sprint, I maybe write an average of 400 words if I'm drafting. I tend to get through, if I'm revising, like a chapter a day usually, and my chapters are about 1,400 words, so they're not super long chapters. I think the reason that it seems like I write maybe faster than the normal person is because of how often I write. Like, I know there's people who write like 800 words in 25 minutes or 1,000 words in 25 minutes. And that has been me at certain points in time, like especially when I was dictating, I was getting kind of crazy word counts. But I wouldn't say I'm like particularly fast in my drafting pace. But here's the thing is that drafting pace is it just so depends. There's parts of the book where I'm getting 100 words in a sprint. There's parts of the books where I get 900 words in a sprint. Like, it really just depends. And also, I don't think it's helpful or productive to like compare our pace of actual physical writing to each other, because like whatever works best for you is what's going to suit and serve your project best. But I think the key to me to finishing projects and finishing drafts in a more succinct amount of time is by just making it a really regular writing practice. Like, I write every day. If there's a day that I don't write, it's a weird day. And that's not to say that you have to write every day in order to be fast. Like, you could maybe instead pick a day of a week where you write for 10 hours or something. Like that typically doesn't work for me. But I found a time during my day that works for me to write. And what's actually worked the best, I've talked about this a little bit before the month started, is having time throughout the day that's dedicated to writing, but it's not required writing. So for me, I have 3 different blocks during the day that I keep available to write. And that is very luxurious because, I work a very flexible job. I don't have a partner or children. And so this is not something I expect to be a reality for most people, but I keep the hour of between 7 and 8, 1 and 2, which is my like lunch break, and 6 and 8 p.m. available for writing. I don't have to write. I actually very rarely write in all 3 of those, but usually I hit 2 or 1, and having that as my baseline makes it so that I'm like moving through chapters more quickly because I'm touching the project more often. I'm not saying you need to do this, obviously, but that is how I think I've been able to be more successful in finishing drafts in a quick manner, is by just really taking those pieces of time and being like, this is when I'm writing. So it's like, if I don't write for a day, it's fine. It's like I don't beat myself up for it, but that's an off day, and I think it's just shifting your mindset of like, I'm a person who writes regularly, and if I'm not writing, it's weird, So that is how I get through things quickly. I also make a lot of deadlines. So if I am working on a draft, I'm always thinking about like, what do I want to get done this week? What do I want to get done in this session? What do I want to get done by the end of the month, And sometimes can be a little bit stifling, but for the most part, it has like propelled me forward. And it's not like I meet all of those deadlines. Like, most of them I don't, but it keeps me moving forward. So yeah, thank you for your question. The other half of that question is, do you get fatigue writing the same project? Prior to this month, I would say no, because I usually have two projects going on at once, not actively like at the same time, but I'll have like one project that's in revision and one project that's in drafting, or one project in a draft 1 and one project in a draft 2. Keeping that pace usually helps me from getting too fatigued. And also I do like to finish my drafts within a pretty short period of time. Like I don't think a first draft has ever taken me more than 3 months, except for like the very first book I wrote. And so because of that, like I'm always doing different things with the project. I think if I was first drafting the same project for like more than 6 months or working on a revision for more time than that, I could see fatigue setting in. But because sometimes I'm tweaking words, sometimes I'm changing paragraphs, sometimes I'm changing plot level things, and it's on different books, like I think that keeps me from getting too fatigued. I say that this was before this month because I'm now on draft 9 of All's Fair in Love and Robbery. And I think that this is like officially the most drafts, the longest I've ever worked on a single book. Besides the one I wrote in high school, which I was not writing it every day. I just like wrote it over the course of multiple years. So I don't really count that. But now I'm on the 9th draft. And I wouldn't say I have fatigue of working on the project, but like it was hard for me to get started because I was like, I have been working on this book for so long, and the thought of opening to chapter 1 that I've reworked it a dozen times is just like mentally taxing. But now that I'm past like the very beginning, I'm taking it chunk by chunk, edit by edit, and it's not as much fatigue. But I think had I not been like daily vlogging and had a deadline with a mentor, I think it would have been really, really difficult. Like I might have procrastinated it more to actually look at and get started with the feedback because of that fatigue. But I would say this is kind of my first time experiencing that, and it doesn't really last. Like sometimes I'll get it before I start writing and be like, really, I don't have to write this. But once I get into it, like it's all good, you know? Someone asks, what's a small writing tip or quick fix type of thing that has made a big impact? And I feel like I learned a lot of these at the Good Lit writing retreat that I went on. And a lot of it is about dialogue tags and action, combining those, right? So instead of me saying, "What's going on?" Alyssa asked while knitting a sweater for the child across the street, which is weird. I'm not knitting. I don't even know what this is, to be honest. Instead of saying that, I would say, "What are you doing?" Alyssa added another row to the sweater she was working on, right? Just combining some things there. It just really tightens up the prose. Also, a lot of the edits that Christina has been making about like just adding in quick, he tightened his collar, I gripped the steering wheel. Like, it's not like these sentences are groundbreaking, but if you can have like a very specific image before dialogue, or even just within the scene, like that could replace like telling. And I feel like it's hard because I didn't realize like what I was doing was telling, but it was. Like if I'm saying tension shifted in my gut, it's not like the most obvious telling in the world, but it is still telling. You're saying I have tension instead of, or like anger roiled in my gut, right? Which is not a bad sentence. Like I'm sure that could be in a book. Still saying the word anger. And instead you could say like my stomach tightened, my skin turned red. Showing it, but you're not saying the word angry, you know? And so while that doesn't need to be every single time, that has been really helpful for me. I'll think on this one, and if I have any more that come up, I will let you know. The next one is, how do you shift from your 9 to 5 to writing? So as I've said, I have a very flexible 9 to 5. I work remote in the afternoons most of the time, unless I have a video shoot or something. And so I am fortunate enough to be able to write on my lunch break. That has made it easy, but like physically coming home and transitioning, I think it's helpful if you have like a series of things that you do when you get home from your 9 to 5 that indicate to you the workday is done, the writing is beginning. So right now, when I get home, I make my lunch and I usually do a puzzle for like 10 minutes. It's not for long, and maybe watch like an authortube video, and that kind of helps me transition. And the same thing at the end of the workday is like, eating a meal, doing a puzzle, and then my brain is like ready to go. Because I think sometimes if you go straight from working to like, okay, now I'm pulling up my manuscript, and your brain is like, we have been working all day and you want us to work more? Just because it's something fun doesn't mean it's not work. Like writing is hard, intensive brain work. So especially if you have a job that's very like mentally demanding, that can be tricky. So I would recommend like giving your brain a true break, going on a quick walk. I do a lot of those when the sun doesn't set at 4:30 p.m. I'll go on a quick walk right at 5, and even if it's like a 10-minute walk, and then I come back and I feel ready to go. So that's kind of my biggest tip, is to not try to jump right into it. Like those 5 minutes you spend resetting like really can help. But also have it be like a defined, like decide what you're going to do before you write, because otherwise it can be like, oh, I need to take a break. I just got home. Let me scroll on my phone for 3 hours, and then coming back to writing is still hard, So have it be something, if you want to write when you get home, have it be a quick like 20-minute thing that you do, or half an hour thing. Okay, this question I could make a whole video about, so let me know if you want me to. Now that you've written romantic suspense and fantasy, which one do you prefer? And I don't know. I think I like them both. I think I'm leaning towards fantasy just because it's what I'm not writing right now. Like it seems more fun than what I'm writing, but I also have not gotten to actually revising a fantasy book. And so I think once I do that, I will have a better answer for that question. But there's a lot of differences. And I think what I really like is not one over the other, but having a balance of the two. I really feel like moving forward, I'm going to work on fantasy projects and romantic suspense kind of alternating. Like when I came back to All's Fair in Love and Robbery after drafting a whole fantasy book, I felt like I had the freshest perspective I've had in a long time, because like, yeah, working on a different project gives you a different perspective, but it's like still crime, still the police are involved, still having to think about the logistics of like kidnapping and murder and all this stuff. And it's like in a fantasy world, you're thinking about such different things that it really gives your mind a creative reset. And I like a lot of the things you can do in fantasy, but I also do like working within the constraints of the real world, because I feel like sometimes the emotion and the connections and the relationships can be more genuine, because like you're working within the within the restrictions of our reality and our society. And those are some of the like relationships that I like to play with the most. I really could make a whole video about this, so I'm not going to go too in depth. That might be coming in December potentially. So yeah. The next one is advice for someone getting into writing. I really don't know, because I feel like I never got into writing at a distinct time. Like I think when I was 13, I just started writing and had the mindset of like, I'm a writer now. I write books all the time. And so I never had really the experience of like getting into writing as an adult, or even consciously, really. It's hard for me to imagine like what that would feel like. Because I think also in this question they were asking, like they have a lot of passion and they want to, but have had trouble getting to the end of a project or like writing something of length. And in that case, I would really recommend, if you're having trouble finishing a book, don't edit as you go. I don't like that advice as a whole, but I do think it could be helpful if you're struggling to get through something. Also, if you're having trouble like getting past a certain point in the book, try outlining something. My advice would be, you aren't going to know how to fix the problem until you just get in there and do it. And so if what's been holding you back from like getting a project that's longer or finishing something is like, oh, but I don't know how to quite handle that yet, the way that you learn how to handle it is by reading, but also by just getting in there and doing it. And you got to get the burnt pancake out of the way. Like in your writing and anything that you do, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take some laps that go bad. And so start really working on like getting your laps in, getting the bad books out of you. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's first draft or first book is bad. Get the first bad scenes out of you and the bad motivations and the bad like character decisions and interior, like start writing so that you can get to the good stuff, because the good stuff comes after you've learned what pitfalls you have. Push through and try to get to the end of something, because that's really like getting to the end of something, going through a revision process with something, even if you're not quite sure it's going in the right direction, like that's how you learn how to write. So just keep going. Like you have so much perspective once you finish a book, even if you're not happy with how it turned out, right? Someone asked, is it okay to write multiple projects at one time? Do whatever you want. No one is the boss of you. Unless you're one of the small percentage of people who write a book who have like an agent or a book deal or a contract. And even then, I think you can do whatever you want, given that you're turning your things in on time, right? There sometimes can be a pitfall if you start way too many projects. Like if you have 25 projects open and you never quite finish any of them, it's worked best for me to have one project that's the priority at a certain time, and another one that like I could work on it if I want, but it's more of a back burner, like it's sitting. I think it's actually good to have multiple projects going on at once, because if you finish a draft, you're going to want to let that draft sit. And then if you have something else that you can pick up and work on, I think that's one of the best ways to get perspective on your novel, is to like fully work on a different project. And if you want to work on two different projects at the same time, like I think it's really just up to your discretion. I was thinking about doing that this month, is like working on the fantasy and also working on this edit. But because this edit is so focused on tone, I felt that it would be difficult to really stay in that voice if I was working on a project with a different voice. So that's why I ended up not doing that. Also just because why would I need to be working on 2 books and daily vlogging? Like why would we need to do that, you know? I think work on whatever you want, but also keep in mind your main priorities. Like, are you trying to get a book ready to publish? Are you trying to get a book ready to query? And if you are, and you're finding that working on so many different things is preventing you from finishing one of them, like maybe then that's like a moment where you take a step back and you're like, okay, for the next, this project is my priority. I'm going to work on it until it's done. And on Saturday afternoons, I can work on whatever I want, fun projects, right? But I think there's nothing wrong with having multiple ideas going, because that's like a lot of writers work that way, where they're working on something and a new idea pops up. Even when I was editing this book and I was working on draft 2 of a book I ended up shelving over the summer, I was having a lot of ideas for the fantasy book I just drafted. And what I did was I started a Notion page for each of my active projects. So I have one that was for the fantasy, and I have like a fantasy project hub. And then I also have, right now I have a Notion hub for, I don't know what it's called, but my new romantic suspense I'll be working on probably in the spring sometime. I have a Notion page for that, or a notes page for that. And so when I get an idea for it, I just pop it in there, you know? And I think having all those projects open allows me to think about and marinate on the ideas. So I think you can definitely have multiple projects going on. Just check in with yourself if you feel like you're not making movement in any of them, and then maybe prioritize, you know? How to shift from writing to filming. So I've talked about this before, and I feel like my advice is not very helpful, because I just don't think that most people operate the way that I do. I am an incredibly verbal processor, if you can't tell. So when I'm writing, I typically need a debrief after I write. It depends. Like if I don't really make a ton of movement, I don't need a debrief. But like if I write a chapter, I want to talk about like, how did it go? What am I feeling about it? And often I don't know how I feel about a chapter until I start verbally debriefing it with someone. And oftentimes that'll be like, if I'm sprinting with friends, I'll do a little verbal debrief and like kind of get into how I'm feeling about it. And it's hard for me to identify that if I don't have a debrief. And so vlogging just came very naturally for me. It's like, okay, I finished a writing sprint. We got to check in and talk about it. Here's how it's going. Here's how I'm feeling. And so I don't feel like there's really a transition for me between writing and filming. Like there's not like, oh, I write and then I have to like reset in order to film and talk about it. But I know that many people, that is the case, where they have to like really formulate their thoughts and think about what they want to say in order for it to come across the right way. And my experience has just been, the second I finish a sprint, I'm like, okay, we got to chat. We got to get it going. You know, I got to keep people updated. So if you're struggling with that, maybe give yourself permission to do a debrief after each sprint. But also if you don't want to, you could also be the kind of YouTuber who like makes more sit down style videos, or at the end of a week of writing, like journals and reflects on it and then makes a script based on that. Like there's a lot of different ways to go about it. So I would try having your camera with you like it's a friend. And I know a lot of people like their typing clips, like they didn't actually write during the typing clips, which I think is fine. But I do, like I just kind of move the camera and I start going. And then sometimes I remember to turn the camera off after like filming for 3 minutes. But other times it literally films for 45 minutes of me typing. And I'm like, girl, I don't really have a helpful tip because I don't really think I shift from writing to filming. I think filming has become a part of my writing process. It's helped me to document the progress I've made, and it's helped me to keep my goals in mind because I want to update the camera about how far I am toward a goal. So it makes me do it, you know? And I think it's also been super helpful in helping me have a consistent, regular writing practice. How has writing changed how you view the world? I think this is Joy's question, and like, girl, let me take a drink of water while I think about this one. I feel like this question is hard because, like I was saying earlier, I don't really remember how I moved about the world when I wasn't writing. Like I was 12 the last time I wasn't actively working on a project, which is actually diabolical to think about. And I think even in middle school I was writing stuff. So it's hard for me to tell the way it's affected the way I view the world because I feel like I've always kind of viewed the world in the lens of that. But I think it helps me to pick up on like patterns, and I think it's made me a more social emotionally aware of things. When you're writing character relationships and character motivation and dynamics of people, I think it just helps me to notice room dynamics and group dynamics and relationship dynamics and kind of more naturally. Like if I'm in a room and there's tension, I can usually break down where there's tension, where it might be coming from, and like why, like the unspoken things in a tense conversation or even an excited conversation, like I feel like those I'm just more aware of, and to a fault too, where it's like even if the tension in the room is not really that bad and nobody's really feeling that tense, like I can feel it and I'm like, there's a boiling point in this room, like somebody might feel tension because of this, even if somebody might not, if that makes sense. So I think that is the biggest impact that I could see, is it makes me more aware of relationship. Which book has been my favorite to write, which is a diabolical question to ask. I have no idea. I loved them all. I'm trying to remember like the experience of writing them. I feel like it's hard to say. I feel like drafting wise, I think drafting my fantasy novel is the most fun I've had drafting a book. Like first drafting a book. I think revision wise, how All's Fair in Love and Robbery came together. I think connection to the story and like how it impacted my own life. The Wedding Season, which is a book I wrote, I don't know, in 2022. I think I was finishing it up when I started this channel. It was about a wedding DJ and there's all these murders and all this stuff. But I had just come off a year of DJing a lot of weddings, and like the connection I felt to that main character is my favorite. So I don't know. I think they're all my favorite in different ways. I do really love the fantasy project right now. And I think All's Fair in Love and Robbery is like, if I had to read the current iteration of all of the books that I've written, I think I would like this one the most. The Wedding Season's good too. I think I would just notice too many errors that I now could fix, right? Have I ever gotten stuck in the middle of a book? Or tips for that. I think if you're stuck in the middle of a book, you either need to go forward or backward. Sometimes like there's a problem earlier on. So like going back and identifying what's the problem earlier in the book that's causing me to get stuck here. So that could be it. But it also could be that you just need to like move forward and just have what's there be good enough and move on to the ending, because Act 2, the messy middle of a book, is often the hardest to write because you're trying to bridge the setup to the ending, and it can be really daunting, especially Act 2 Part 2s, to like get that right. And so sometimes, actually often, I think All's Fair in Love and Robbery, The Wedding Season, Sunshine, all of those books, I kind of skimmed or skipped in the drafting process Act 2 Part 2. Like I had the main events and I wrote like the bare minimum scenes to get us to the ending, because then once I wrote the ending, I knew what needed to happen in Act 2. So sometimes writing the bare minimum scenes in the middle and getting to the ending can make it more clear what you're supposed to do in the middle. So I would say don't stop in the middle. Keep pushing forward or go backward and see if there's a problem that you need to address. But the middles, also just know that middles are hard. And so it's not going to be the most hunky-dory, I'm having the time of my life section of the book. And so if it's hard, it might just be hard. And to move forward, and you might be surprised with the quality of the work when you go and you look back on it. I thought, was that the last question? Oh, there's also, what are you the most proud of in the last year? Which I will answer, I guess. I think writing-wise, I'm really proud of getting into Smooch Pit. I'm also really proud of getting into the Goodlit Retreat and like what both of these experiences have done and meant for me so far. I also am proud of like pushing through to the end of All's Fair in Love and Robbery in the spring when I was like really going through a difficult mental time. Still managing and believing that I would be creative again when it really was difficult to find that. And like even to this day, I'm proud of that. Keeping the spirit and keeping the hope and keeping the diligence, even when I was really struggling, like being able to see beyond that, even in just writing. Like I think sometimes that was the only thing not the only thing, it's a little dramatic. I never doubted that I would finish All's Fair in Love and Robbery. And I never doubted that I would keep writing. I never thought that I would stop, and I haven't. And I think it really could have, like I could have thought that in the way that I was feeling in the spring, and honestly into the summer. So I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud of how far I've come. If you want more on that, just go back on my YouTube channel. And I think there's a lot of thumbnails of me like crying. So that will give you more information about what the heck is going on. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you for 4,000 of you, which is actually a diabolical number. Thank you for sticking around in November and watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video. Comment down below 4 of your favorite emoji for 4,000 subscribers. Okay, thank you so much for being here. If you have any more questions, comment them down below. I'll maybe try to include them in a future video. Okay, bye. I'll see you tomorrow.